everyone. Welcome to Noise11.com. A pretty exciting new album, Downhill from Everywhere. Now, interesting title for a start. You've gone through the whole COVID thing. How much of Downhill from Everywhere relates to COVID and your personal experiences, and how much of it was prior to the pandemic?
It's all pretty much prior to the pandemic, but there are resonances in the songs that sort of illuminate the pandemic even further. You know, songs like "Human Touch," but "Downhill from Everywhere" is a reference to the fact that the ocean is downhill from everywhere. It's downhill from humanity, really. And it was a remark made by this oceanographer named Captain Charles Moore, who's the oceanographer who discovered the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. Discovered it by happening to be in the middle of it and realizing that he was, navigating through a sea of plastic. So that song originates from contemplating that. I mean, how many of the things we do in our daily life and how many things we're dependent upon that generate plastic that eventually winds up in the ocean. Although it's not a linear song that you have to sort of pay attention to from the beginning to the end, that's what those references are all from. They're all from that, contemplating that.
It's incredible, isn't it, that I guess you were talking about the environment 50 years ago. There's almost a thread between Before the Deluge and Downhill.
Yeah, there's a thread between Before the Deluge and everything. I mean, it was a sort of quasi prophecy. It was sort of like and that was based on a book called Ecotastrophe by a man named Dr. Paul Ehrlich. So anyway, I read. So that book, that was sort of based on the idea of like speaking from after an apocalyptic event of some kind. And actually what Ecotastrophe was about the compounding catastrophes that basically amount to the world's demise. And you have those compounding catastrophes taking place now with climate change and with the buildup of plastic in our environment and in our bodies. It's not just that we have plastic in the ocean, it's just that you have babies being born with plastic in their bodies because of what's been ingested by their parents. So it's a existential threat. What humans are doing to the ocean and to the planet in general, more than 50 years ago, calls into question, whether, the survival of humankind and the planet. Writing a song about it must be the most glacial response you could have. I mean, at the time it takes to write a song, times to get, and then just hear a song or to do anything. So I don't flatter myself that this is, exactly a call to arms. It is a call to consciousness. And I think the resonance of the title, Downhill from Everywhere, really does speak to what's happening across the board in the environment and in politics.
But I guess, if you go back 50 years when we were talking about the environment, we were talking about, things like no nukes. Here we are now. Lyrically, you still have to address things that you were talking about as a threat way back then. As a human being, that must be a very big concern to you. That, in 50 years, we haven't really learnt much, have we?
No, and really the threat of nuclear power was that the radiation keeps happening for 28,000 years. So whatever we were going to do to curtail that, to enclose that or to contain that threat, not only has not begun sufficiently, but I mean, it would have to take place a long period of time. I mean, all these, I'm going to take part in a celebration in a month or so, or sometime in the coming month, of the decommissioning of a nuclear power plant in New York called Indian Point. And every time they finally give up on one of these nuclear plants, which was designed to generate electricity over a period of 30 or 40 years. And then, of course, it'll take almost more money than it took to build it, to decommission it, to clean the environment after it. So it's not efficient in any way. It's not a reasonable way of, it's not a sustainable way of making electricity or of doing business,
Mm. The opening line on the album, I'm still looking for something. It's a very poignant line, isn't it? I mean, here we are, Jackson Browne now in his 70s. I'm still looking for something. Do we ever stop?
No, I don't think you do. If you're lucky, you keep looking, because, if you stop trying to find the thing that you crave, or the thing that'll please you, you stop. I mean, that's like, that's the end of everything. Then if you stop looking. But I think it's easy to be persuaded that you've arrived somewhere and that you don't have, especially if you think that money is going to answer your needs. You reach, and they always talk about how people like retire and then die. It's like, it's something to watch out for. I think for musicians, music for life. You're a musician for life. You never really stop listening or looking or trying to master your instrument or become, proficient at what you do. And then there are also the surprising things that happen in the course of a musical life, where you discover something that you didn't know was taking place. Whether it's something that already took place a long time ago, like I must have been in my 40s when I discovered the Miles Davis Quintet. And I was in my 20s when I discovered, In a Silent Way and Bitches Brew. So it's like I was no stranger to Miles Davis. But in my 40s, I suddenly listened to the quintet and I went, oh my God, I had no idea that was going on. And it was such a wonderful incarnation of his genius. And of course, he didn't stay doing that. He went on to do all that, that really groundbreaking work with Bitches Brew and In a Silent Way. So I think everywhere, everywhere you look, you see the evidence of that search, of the wisdom, that with which you leave what you know and launch yourself into what you don't know.
Yeah, I guess the definition of new music really is the first time you hear it. So, as an artist with recorded works over 50 years, you've really left time capsules for even future generations to discover.
Hopefully, yeah. Hopefully there will be future generations. Yeah.
Some magnificent observations on this record, and the absolutely beautiful A Human Touch you did with Leslie Mendelssohn. Now, that was done for a documentary about AIDS, and I guess we got to hear that song a year or two out. Tell me about that one.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to put it on this record because I wanted to have a wider listening, a broader, listening. But that song, I was invited to do a song with her, or to write a song for this movie and maybe do a duet with this artist that the director had in mind. And I didn't know Leslie's music. And I just sort of didn't think I could do it. And I told them they should just keep, I was busy making my records. So I didn't think I had time to immerse myself in this and write this particular song. And I also was unsure that I could write something that would be good enough. So they said, I said, you better, better keep looking, look for something. They said, and the director said to me, we'll wait for you, So there's a friend of mine, Paul Haggis. So eventually they sent me this song, and it had a good start. It had several really good verses and a couple really good verses, and I really added to it. I built another room in it, or expanded a little bit on what was being said. So I think some of my favorite lines are Steve McEwen's. Leslie's writing partner is Steve McEwen, and he's quite a well-known writer and a collaborator with all kinds of artists. A interesting guy. He's from South Africa. He's English from South Africa. Grew up in South Africa and lives in Nashville writing country songs. So he's got quite a broad perspective, and I really enjoy these guys a lot. I mean, we made such instant friends. But the song is about the first AIDS ward in the early days of the AIDS epidemic, the first dedicated AIDS ward in San Francisco, and the controversy, the fear that people had about the disease. They didn't even know how it was transmitted from person to person. They just knew it was connected with this community of gay people, and they were the film is really about the courage that these nurses and doctors summoned to treat people with dignity and to give them the best care they could. And there's an interesting thing in the movie where this doctor's saying, and he was one of the brave people who did it. He just said he'd go home and he'd have nightmares about possibly contaminating his family. Like I say, it was before they knew how it was passed from person to person. But there was a big controversy that was largely driven by the general distrust, disapproval, of the gay community. So there were some nurses that, wanted to wear a hazmat suit, to care for these patients, and the patients were dying, needed the comfort and the care of them. So, Steve came up with this human touch, the theme of the song, and most of the best lines in the song. I'm really proud of being part of this song, and I really was one of the first times, one of the only times I really remember really a real exchange of ideas and talking about what each of these lines meant. I mean, we really kind of took apart my verse, and I talked about it with him a lot, about what was being said. And as I say, my favorite lines he wrote, but I also put in some that I think that were essential to make his lines work. He said, to give you an example, he says, like, everybody wants to be beautiful. That's just so true. And if you talk about how people live their lives, they do think they're living a life. Everybody thinks they're living a life or wants to live a life that's beautiful, even if they're living the life of I was gonna say no matter what is, but I added the line, and live life their own way, because it's really about that. It's really the song is about that, about acceptance of other people's decisions and their nature. In the very beginning, it says, you can call it a decision. I say it's how we're made. And that's one of my lines and one of Steve's, but it's really that people think that homosexuality, people who don't disapprove of it think you can be cured of it. They don't accept the idea that the same God that made you how you are made me how I am. And so it's all contained in that, in just a few simple lines, strokes. I think he's a brilliant writer, and I'm really proud of the song. And Leslie, I loved singing with Leslie. She was just, we wound up going out on a tour, and I brought her out just to do that one song each night as a duet. Great, a great singer.
On the Time the Conqueror album, you addressed the Bush administration. Now, you don't directly go for the Trump administration on this record, except, I guess, in the song The Dreamer, where you're talking about a side effect of the Trump administration.
Everything that he brought to bear was based on fear. I mean, he took people's fears and he played on their fears and continues to, and drive people's fear of the other, fear that they'll be let out, fear that they'll be betrayed. In fact, this wall is such an emblem. It's so emblematic of the idea that people want to barricade themselves and inside their country. This is another song that I wrote with somebody else, and who, again, Eugene's lines in the song are my favorite lines are his. So, and that might be an indication of what it takes to really have a good time writing a song with someone else. You have to love what they're doing and what they bring to the song. It can't be that they brought theirs and you brought yours and you come somehow fit together. For it to really work, you have to just be completely taken with what that other person is bringing to the song. And he has lines like, where do the dreams go, born of faith and illusion? For me, that to put those two things, faith and illusion, together in a line is very powerful writing. And I can't take credit for that line. I just love it. But of course I do take credit every time I sing the song. I'm singing a song that I had, a part in writing. The other line I really love is to say, where there is no road and no footprint. Just so the detail of that, of like seeing a road without a footprint on it, or seeing somebody who had passed in secret, I mean, actually I just gave myself chills reciting my friend Eugene's lines. Like, it's just good, really good.
We're about to hit a series of 50-year anniversaries for you. 2022 will mark the 50th anniversary of the first record, and I guess over the next 5 or so years to 2027, there was a body of work that you produced through the 70s that are all coming up for those 50th anniversaries. Is it something that you will stop and recognise, or will you leave that for other people to...
You mean like, will there be a cake? Will there be like a...
Where's the party, Jackson? And am I invited?
Well, I hope there would be a party of some kind. I mean, I hope we all continue to celebrate, and celebrate together. But I don't know. I don't really. To me, those anniversaries are a little bit artificial. There are more important ways of noting milestones, I think. But I think that the amount of years, the round numbers, I've stopped celebrating my birthday. I think the next one that I will be willing to celebrate will be like 80. Let's like keep it to round numbers if I get there. But I think that I'm happy. I'm really happy to have my early records sort of given some attention for having if that means that if people are saying they've stood the test of time, or they mark something that, well, there's a whole book out now that was written by a guy named a journalist named Ron Brownstein, who used my song "Rock Me on the Water" for the title of it, and he talks about 1974 as a particularly pivotal year, or a year that was somehow like marks the zenith of a certain of the music of me and a bunch of my fellow Southern Californians. They were talking. It's really a book about Los Angeles and how Los Angeles influenced music and influenced films. And I think it's a good book. I'm really looking forward to reading the part about films. I mean, just about anything that's written about music always sort of like, it doesn't, I mean, about popular music, I mean, doesn't generally grab my interest too much. But there's books written about music I don't know, like books like Ned Sublet's books about Cuba, or about or the I forget his first name, Richard Poren, or Pohren, the guy that's written about flamenco, so many great books about Paco de Lucia and flamenco. That I can read, I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I don't mean to. I just yeah. I suppose there'll be a bunch of uh, anniversaries, and if that means that people hear my songs again, that's or a new generation is drawn to them. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, Downhill from Everywhere, a remarkable record with very poignant stories. You know, I can recommend people listen to the lyrics as well as listen to the music, and you know that body of work over the years. Look at it all those years of.
Got a lot of vinyl there.
That's a lot, all from the original days. We played a lot of Jackson Browne on vinyl on the radio back in the 70s.
Thanks for playing my music. I really appreciate that. Um, yeah, vinyl, and now you can't even find a CD. Now you can't even find a CD player. I walk into like a big, like appliance store and try to buy a CD player, and they go, "What's that?" I mean, you can't. You can't. I tried to buy a hot plate. You don't even know you and I would know what a hot plate is, right? I don't know if the Australian word for it is hot plate, but like a single burner thing that you can put a coffee pot on. Like, you go into a hardware store, and if the person's in their 20s, you say, "Want to buy a hot plate?" And they go, "What's that? What?" Hot plate, and then you describe it, and they go, I don't know. And then they show you some kind of microwave or something like that. You
That's right. If it can't plug into a USB, it's not real anymore.
Right. Right.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you as always. I enjoy our chats, and it's good to see in 2021 we're both still here, Jackson.
Yeah, we're alive and still looking for something. And yeah, I hope I see you soon. I hope I get to Australia in the next. I think the next time is the possibility. Maybe is next year. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly if I've been asked yet, but I really love to get back to. I mean, there was a tour planned, at least. Well, among the ones that got postponed, it was a tour in Australia, and I think it is coming up somehow in the next year or two.
We certainly hope so. Thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Paul.